because this has impacted me so severely, it's not something that we can really move forward in the same way our relationship was in the past. This is a totally new relationship now.
You're listening to the Brendon Marotta Show.
In this episode, a mother and son discuss circumcision. Carter Steinoff feels harmed by circumcision and reached out to me to facilitate a discussion between him and his mom, Tiffany. His mother recognizes the harm of circumcision and wants to find out how she can support her son and create a safe connection and relationship with him. This is an emotionally challenging discussion, but an important one. Now, here is Carter and Tiffany Steinoff. So I want to start by thanking the two of you for having the bravery to have this conversation, because I know it's a conversation that I've had with my family, and anytime there's this level of engagement or emotional intimacy between family members, I know that it often brings up all of our stuff, all of the things that we're feeling or holding on to, our own emotional patterns, and I appreciate the two of you being willing to look at them together and communicate around it.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. So why don't we start? What I'd like to know from each of you is what you're feeling right now, just where you are in your body and your own emotions, and what it is you'd like to get out of this conversation, what it would look like, seem like, feel like, sound like, if this went exactly the best possible version of this conversation it could be.
Carter, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure.
Why don't you start, Carter?
Well, I'm definitely very nervous to have this conversation, knowing that it's going to be broadcast to a larger audience down the line. But I'm also really excited to begin having this conversation, with my mom and watching my mom get involved in some advocacy around this issue, or just, maybe initially having a discussion on this topic. It's something that's obviously very important to me. And at this point, really, a part of my identity. And so having my mom involved in this process with me is, it's really encouraging. It makes me feel optimistic about our relationship in the future. And overall, I'm getting a great vibe.
Mm-hmm.
So Carter, you mentioned there's one part of you that feels nervous. Is there anything that part of you would need or wants, or?
Definitely a component of it is not necessarily that my mom and I are going to be speaking about this issue, but it's just that I'm going to be publicly coming out as being opposed to this practice and as being a victim of this practice, right? And so that's a difficult identity to put forward, and it's something that I'm not necessarily 100% comfortable with yet, but it's the reality of my situation. So that's how I'm going to move forward. It's just difficult for me now to accept that.
The nervousness of public reaction, it's something I'm very familiar with.
Right.
And then the second part of that question is, if this went the best possible way it could, or you got everything you wanted out of this conversation, what would that look like or sound like?
So a while back, you asked me, like, what am I trying to get out of this conversation, or why am I interested in speaking with my mom on this issue publicly? And I didn't have a great answer to that. And the answer is evolving over time, but I think it was difficult for me to translate my thoughts around this, but I'm looking to establish the role that a parent or parental figure has in advocacy on their child's behalf, or really on their own behalf, if their child feels harmed physically and psychologically by this practice. And so my experience, with my own parents and experiences that I've heard from other men with their parents is that they are very, very disappointed, and in some ways even feel betrayed by their parents' response to their trauma. And so I would like to begin exploring what it is that men who feel like victims of this practice are looking for from their family and the people that are close to them on this topic. And so, what I would like to accomplish through this meeting is beginning to establish that, and then inspiring other parents and other men to begin having these conversations as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you are interested in stepping into a role of leadership around this issue. And part of what you're looking to do is model for others how parents and men can have conversations about this and how parents can advocate for their children around this. And that there might be a part of you that would want her to advocate for you as well in the role that you're stepping into.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said.
So, Tiffany, congratulations. You've raised a leader of men.
Yeah.
And he's stepping into that role now. So I'd like to know from you how it is that you're feeling and what your needs are or what it is you'd like around this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like Carter said, nervous because we've had plenty of private conversations, but this is the first time we've ever taken it public, where we're publicly expressing this. So there's a level of nervousness. I don't think I'll be surprised by anything Carter has to say, other than maybe new things come out of this conversation that I didn't know before. But yeah, feeling a bit nervous, and there is truth around this public reaction. Many people have different thoughts on this. And as I've been working with Carter, just having more confidence in, being firm in what I believe, so that when I have a conversation with someone, I'm not really intimidated by their reaction if it's something other than what I would have expected. So I'm getting more comfortable talking about it. And I think as time goes on, I'll become more and more comfortable as well. But in terms of what I want to get out of this, or what I'm hoping, or what the ideal situation that would come from this, I love my son. And when he first approached me with this, I can remember it was a parking lot. We were having a conversation, and he was really kind of, he was upset with me for a lot of different things. And then out of the blue, he just said, "And I'm mad that you had me circumcised." And my first reaction, because I didn't understand where that was coming from, I kind of laughed. I thought, "What are you talking about?" And my first reaction was, I laughed, because it seems such a far-fetched idea. And we've come so far since then. We were estranged for a period of time. It's been a long ride. The fact that we are where we are today is a true testament of us kind of leaning into each other and understanding each other. And, I get kind of emotional talking about it, of course, but I'm so happy where we are today. This has been a long process, and I'm really happy where we are today. I've often asked Carter, what do you need from me? And at times he said, "I don't know. I'm still working on that. I'm still working." So I feel like this is the next step in that conversation, where he's had some time to process it and think about it and say, "Hey, Mom, this is where I need you to be. And my level of understanding and education is ready for that."
It sounds like you two have grown a lot in your relationship together. And I want to add that it's okay to be emotional about it.
Yeah.
This is a good thing to be emotional about. So thank you for being willing to have that conversation. Since I know that one of the things Carter would like is to model for others how that conversation can happen, how did the two of you change in that conversation and have that conversation over time? Since when you initially started talking, you laughed and you didn't really understand it. And now it sounds like you have a much deeper understanding.
Right. Well, in the beginning, and I think maybe you experience this as well, Brendon, is when there's a lot of anger surrounding this. So I remember Carter had a lot of anger that he was feeling, and sometimes directed towards me, right? A lot of the time, it was a very angry thing. Like, "I love you, but I'm so angry with you." And that anger, I feel, has kind of turned into something a little more positive. He's more action oriented, and that kind of helped to build the relationship. But as he's moved through these stages of understanding and probably very much so grief of what happened. I think we've, and I've had grief, I've had guilt. I've had, how could I have harmed my child in such a way? A lot of regret, those situations where you can't go back and change anything. But Carter's been very, very patient with me. And, that anger I see has kind of turned into something a lot more positive. But that didn't happen overnight. It was a process. And I'm just really glad that he's shown this level of forgiveness.
It sounds like you felt some guilt and regret around this too,
Yeah.
and maybe are still feeling it now.
Yeah.
Is there something that you need? Go ahead.
No, and probably a little bit of anger. Like at the time, there was really no one sat me down. It was in a time where we really had internet. No one sat me down and said, here are the list of, the pros and cons. And I could have walked away and made a decision. It seemed very much like I was just, subscribing to norms around that time. And so a lot of anger, like where was the literature? Where was the opportunity for me to make an informed decision?
It sounds, I know a lot of men around this issue have anger that they weren't protected, but it would also make sense to me if parents had a lot of similar feelings around the fact that they also were not protected. And it sounds like you may have had your own feelings to process around this. And I'm curious where you are with that and how you've done that so far.
Again, like I said, when Carter and I were kind of estranged, the guilt was really magnified for me. Here I'd done something and now I couldn't even be with my son who I wanted to be close to. So it was compounded. So as Carter and I have strengthened our relationship over time, I think that guilt is kind of subsiding. And again, like Carter took his anger and turned it into something more positive. I can take my guilt and try to turn it into something more positive. Where I was just telling Carter today, as I was telling someone, that I was doing this with Carter this afternoon, and they said, "Oh, what will you be talking about?" And I confidently said, without any fear, where we, in the very short version of where we had been with this process. And it opened up a conversation with her. And without her having any criticalness towards what we were talking about, she really listened. And it makes me feel like that's where I can be of a benefit, being able to share my own personal experience, that through Carter, and maybe just being confident in those conversations with people.
I'm noticing that there are ways that both of you have a lot to give and a lot that you can offer the world, and then also ways that you're needing support. Yeah. And part of the challenge, it sounds like for you, Tiffany, is that there's absolutely ways that you as a parent and you as someone who experienced that half of this particular wounding or trauma might need support, but it's not really, children are not usually the ones that offer parents support. So you might need support from people beyond him who are other people in your life. And it sounds like because Carter has put a lot of energy and learning into others who are involved on this issue, he's found some of that, but it sounds like you might need some of that as well as too.
Yes, completely agree. And where do you go for that? There isn't a support group from others who.
There's actually an entire community of what are known as regret parents, and there's multiple groups that speak about that online. So that connecting with those is something that I'm certain will happen as a result of this podcast, because I know that those groups listen to me and I have a bit of an audience with them. So there are absolutely people who you might be able to reach out to there. But, one of the things I've spoken with people about is the need for more resources to help men in their healing. And it sounds like we might also need more resources to help parents in their healing too.
Yes.
So Carter, is there anything that you want to say to your mom in this conversation anything about what you've heard so far, or is there anything that you're feeling right now?
Yeah, I think my mom kind of gave a good context for where we are at now in our relationship, but there are some areas that I wanted to offer some transparency and some honesty on. And I think that a lot of the overt hostility that I've had in the past towards my parents and those close to me has dissipated significantly. So I'm not really expressing as much anger and disappointment and these feelings of betrayal towards my parents anymore. And the reason is because I'm looking to be diplomatic with them and establish a relationship, a strong relationship in a way where we can move forward together. But the reality is that behind the scenes, a lot of these emotions still persist on a day-to-day basis. They've definitely been reduced, but I do have very strong emotions around that. And something that's really important to me is being honest about that and being upfront with my parents and the people around me about that, because I think that's critical to actually being able to move forward on this issue with my parents and with other people around me and with society as a whole, to acknowledge that these very, very, very strong feelings exist on this issue, and they're very negative emotions, right? And so I kind of want to walk people through, I don't know if this is the time in the conversation to do that, but the sequence of events that leads a man to be in this position psychologically, right? What does it take to make a man, or just a human being in general, have this strong of emotion towards something, where it causes them to distance themselves from their parents, and all of these other reactions that take place. So if this is the time really to dive into that, I'm not sure if you wanted to direct the conversation somewhere else. But.
Well, it sounds like that you have your own feelings around this issue you want seen and heard. And if there are things you want seen and heard, then let's say them and see them.
Okay, fair enough. So I want people to meet the men who feel traumatized by this at a certain level, right? Some acknowledgement of the severity of what took place. So this isn't, to me, something that an apology and a policy change or something like that can rectify in my situation, and in the situation, or how a lot of other men view this. This was a very significant event that happened to us. And so the truth is that it's likely that these feelings that I have towards my parents, they're never going to fully go away, right? And there's going to be some remainder of that for the rest of my life. And I've been experiencing this now for 4 years, right? These very, very deep feelings of negativity towards my parents, right? It's so unfortunate to say, but sometimes I look at my mother and my father, I'm like, those are my mutilators, right? That's horrifying to me. I'm like, wow, those are the individuals that facilitated genital mutilation on me. That is so frightening and horrifying. And I'm not going to, keep preaching on that and go down that rabbit hole forever. But I want, other men and other parents to understand that, this is the reality for some of us and how some of us view and frame this issue. So, when I'm having conversations with my parents and we're joking and laughing around, a lot of the times behind the scenes, I'm like, whoa, I'm having to confront the person that, facilitated this very, very dark thing on me. And so I want my mom to be aware of that. I want, people in my life to be aware of that I feel like I'm a victim of an atrocity, right? And that's the reality I'm going to have to live in for the rest of my life, with everyone around me. It doesn't have to dominate everything, right? I want to live a good and productive life where I'm not constantly plagued by these negative emotions and these negative thoughts. But I do want some acknowledgement that this is probably going to be around in my psychological state for the rest of my life, and that I will be traumatized by this for the rest of my life. And I think there are ways to heal and move forward, but the physical consequences for me are severe. And that's just the, impact that it's had on me personally. And so, having, sexual relationships and things like this is always going to interfere with that for me. And so it's not something that I can just walk away from or move away from psychologically, simply because the physical consequences impact me on a day-to-day basis and on a regular basis. And so, yeah, that's a component of what I wanted to share with my mom, is that unfortunately, the severity of what happened is going to impact our relationship for the rest of our life. And that's something that I want to share with other people, other parents, other people that maybe are considering this, other parents, that this can impact a relationship with somebody's parents, between a child and parents, for the rest of their life in a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that there is a part of you that feels that this was an atrocity, that it's impacted you in a negative way, and that part of you holds your mom responsible for this. How is it you'd like her to respond to that?
Sure,
or acknowledge
so,
it?
I guess a good question to pose, that I'm not really looking for an answer to this. I think it just frames it in an interesting way. If I were to hire somebody to strap my mother down into a circumstraint, and she had a significant quantity of her genital tissue and her genital structures ablated from her body, just strapped her down and violently and perversely and wickedly mutilated her, what would she expect from me? I was like, oh my God, I didn't know. Right? Oh shoot, I'm so sorry, Mom. I didn't know. The resources weren't available for me. Right? I didn't read enough. So shoot, you dang it.
So it
Got
sounds like
mutilated.
you want more than just an apology.
I'll
But
tell you what I would do. I would commit the rest of my life to rectifying this atrocity that I committed. That was an act, right? If it was genuinely an accident, everyone involved, we just didn't know.
and
Then
what would that look like for you if she actually did that? How would that that show up?
it's a difficult question to answer on the spot, right? There's actually a significant amount of context that would have to be shared for that. A lot of things that could be done, right? What is actually realistic for somebody? I don't necessarily have the answer to that at this moment, but I want that conversation to happen and continue. It's really an evolving conversation, I think, and not something totally dictated by myself. It's really what is, I want my mom to be a part of that conversation with me. And I don't want it to be something where I'm like, this is what I'm expecting of you, or, this is what I'm demanding from you. I want it to be this intuitive response from her, or this organic response that emerges because she recognizes the impact that this had. But I think what needs to happen first is the understanding of how this harmed me needs to be accepted by both parties. Obviously myself, I've accepted this, but then, my mom as well, and really society at large. When I say things like mutilation and atrocity, right? Those are grave human rights violations, very, very serious and significant. And when you start framing in that context, I believe that the response is really going to be modified because of that.
So it sounds like you want her to acknowledge the severity of what happened to you. And the way that you'll know that she's seen it is that she responds the way you would if you engaged in something that severe towards her, which would be a lifelong commitment to making sure that the harm is undone and does not happen to others.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And some acknowledgement that, what she thought our relationship would look like is going to really have changed because of this. So, how we have a relationship, what I kind of am expecting of her is going to be much different than maybe what she envisioned when she started out here. And so, and I really don't want to come across as if I'm demanding anything or being hostile. I'm really looking to work with my mom, but I would think that another individual like my mom would expect something if I had done this to her, right? And so maybe beginning to frame it from that perspective can get people to understand, what it is that individuals who feel traumatized by this are looking from from their parents on this issue.
So, Tiffany, I think most parents would have a very difficult time hearing what Carter just said. And you have been a very attentive listener during that. So I'd like to know what you're feeling now and how you feel about what he just said.
I mean, he's maybe never said it that way, but he's communicated very, very strongly a lot of these points with me. When he talks about, sometimes I'm with my parents and, we're what would naturally be this really fun time, we're all smiling and laughing, but inside my head, I'm thinking something very, very different. I've seen that look on him. I know where we sometimes lose him in that, and then my heart goes to him in that moment. And there's sort of guilt to be happy. I mean, he's expressed when you go and you're able to go on with your life and not have this profound sadness in this area. I don't have that choice. So there's almost kind of like this, come with me in solidarity so we can feel the same thing. And it kind of brings that intimacy into a relationship when you have this shared sense of pain and maybe what Carter's saying, purpose as well. So I don't think it's unfair for him to ask that. This is what happened in our lives. And sometimes whatever's given to people, that's what you have, that's your life purpose. So I don't, it may never look exactly how Carter, we come into this with different perspectives, but I certainly can appreciate when he says, Mom, come alongside me. That lets me know that you are understanding me, understanding the gravity of my trauma and pain. And I don't think it's unfair to ask.
How do you feel about it, though?
Again, it's just a sadness that this is what he is experiencing in life. I wish that wasn't part of his life. Yeah. I wish I could take it away. I did a creative writing assignment a long time ago. I'm still working on it, but for Carter, he looked, I'm his parent, I'm his mother. And I think mothers carry this stronger feeling because I was supposed to know, right? I'm the nurturer, the caregiver. I was kind of supposed to know. Even though his father had the penis, I was supposed to know, right? And, all through his life, I made sure his toys were in place. I made sure that he got to, baseball practice, I took care of every aspect of his life. And so in this creative writing piece, something came to me, like, Mom, where's my foreskin? Like, you're supposed to know this stuff. Mom, where's my foreskin? Why? And the frustration that I can't find it and go put it back, right? I mean, that's not going to happen. And that, I don't know if that helps to kind of explain where I am. Like, I was supposed to know this. And I can imagine him looking into me and going, Mom, you took care of everything. How did we miss that one? Right? So, yeah, I mean, I think this is another stage in the understanding. And I cry, but there's a lot of hope in this as well, that I'm so this is a level of conversation that I haven't had with Carter. And while it's sad and it's permanent, it's also hopeful.
I think tears are an appropriate reaction. I want to acknowledge too that you're actually feeling it, and that whereas many other parents might become defensive or
Yeah.
want to ensure that they want to avoid the feeling in some way, you're feeling it. And
Feel it.
Carter, it sounds like your mom is aware of how severe this is, and that sometimes even when you're having a conversation with her and she is and you have that moment of the feeling entering an otherwise happy moment, she's even aware of it.
Yeah.
Were you aware that when you have that come up that she's sometimes aware of it?
Not exactly, actually, no. But I definitely understand that, when my mood suddenly changes or, the expression on my face changes or something like that, that they can probably tell something is up with me. And so I'm not surprised that she correctly identified, maybe what was going on there simply because I've expressed this, so clearly to them in the past.
He often
So
sometimes says to me, "Why are you looking at me?" I catch you looking at me, and this is why, son, because I'm
Right. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough. Can't argue with that.
one of the things that I'm noticing is that you want her to be aware of the level of pain that you feel.
Yeah.
And I
I
also,
crave it, even, I'd say.
Mhm.
and are you aware of the degree to which she wants to be with your pain and protect you? I don't think she'd have that reaction of tears if she didn't feel that way.
Um, so that is so important to me, right? Having my mom understand the gravity of the situation for myself. But it never changes the situation that I'm in or what the genesis of this pain, right? This all originates from a physical issue that I'm experiencing. The psychological struggles around this are also very, very difficult to deal with. But I think this is really different for each man, right? Some men, might not be impacted as much physically, or that just might not bother them as much. But for me personally, that is where I struggle with the most on this issue. So being able to communicate that element, that facet of this to my mom has been pretty difficult. And I think there are some things that I could have done maybe better on my end. I've definitely tried. But having this conversation with your mom is like really difficult when I'm describing anatomically the consequences for my own penis. Like that's where this conversation begins getting really difficult. But that is what's so important. That's what I want my mom to understand is the sexual impacts that this has had on me and how that impacts me on a day-to-day basis. I recently have been in a sexual relationship with someone that I really like, this girl that I really like. I want my mom to know that during this sexual relationship, 90% of the time, I felt nothing on my penis. It was my whole sexual experience is largely muted.
Mm.
That's so disturbing to me. That's so sad.
It
That's
is
so
disturbing.
sad. That's such a loss in my life. So what I want my mom to say and what I want you to say, Brendon, what I want society to say is you got screwed in life. You got screwed in life. You'll suffer with for the rest of your life. And we failed you. I failed you as your mother. Your father failed you. The hospital failed you. The physician failed you. The state failed you. The federal government failed you. You got screwed in life. You got mutilated and you'll suffer for the rest of your life from a complete degradation of, you know, our moral, ethical, legal, and logical framework. We failed you. That's what I want my mom and society, and that's a proper response. And that's just scratching the surface. That's step one. That is step one in a very, very very long process. And I've never had more confidence in my life kind of asking that from someone, right? This is, I feel good. I'm like, wow, I'm standing up for myself now as a victim of an atrocity. I'm putting myself out there now and really, communicating what happened and being real with people about what I'm expecting from them and the reality of the situation for myself and many other men. So I haven't really seen that response, right? It's all kind of about, how we can move forward and things like that. But before we can move forward, we need to establish and be present and real about what actually took place. So that's kind of the response to answer your question. That's what I'm looking for. And I think I'm really getting there with the people in my life and with my mom and other individuals.
So, Tiffany, is that response something you could give him? That acknowledgement?
Yeah, I guess I'm still unclear, I'm still unclear of um, what exactly he needs from me, But in terms of responding to about the severity and how this has affected him sexually, that's a harder conversation to have with your child. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And
he's
yeah,
been very, very honest with me about that, and it is sad. It is a sad thing that this such an important part of his life,
anatomy.
especially
Yeah.
with his relationship with another person, is largely affected by this. Yeah, that's big.
So like something else that I want to communicate as important to me, when I'm having like a sexual relationship or a sexual experience, oftentimes the thoughts that I'm having are dominated by my parents did this to me, right? This horrifying element to it where like, oh my God, I'm mutilated. My parents mutilated, my society mutilated. It's like this overall kind of very, very unpleasant experience for me, coupled with the fact that I have the majority of erogenous tissue on my sexual organ removed, and the remaining sexual tissue, the properties of it have significantly um, been diminished because of the keratinization that's taken place. So another thing that I really want to communicate is that this feels like a radical thing that was done to my body. This is not just this small little snip, and I know you're aware of that. This is a radical genital modification surgery. Radical, right? When the majority of your erogenous tissue has been removed, how can I even accept that that's my reality? I want somebody to come in and say, prove me wrong. um, but I know the reality of the situation for myself. And so it's sometimes difficult for me to even conceptualize. Here's the problem: is sometimes I can have a strong relationship with you, mom, but other times I'm like, oh my God, what happened to me? How do you build a relationship with someone who facilitated your genital mutilation? I feel like I'm living this this two-faced type of life where on one hand, like maybe I'm having a relationship with it, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, I was abused. I was abused. And I understand that you didn't have the frame of reference at the time. But on the other hand, I'll never understand that. And we have to accept that I'll never understand how you handed your child over to have a penile mod, right? Because I don't have that psychological profile that would ever be able to really understand that. And that I question things all the time. You've known that for a long time now. I wouldn't just blindly go with something. So I don't have that same frame of reference that you do. So it is very difficult. It's very difficult. And I think, this process and this relationship will evolve more over time. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now. And so I would also like to be able to more effectively and have a deeper conversation on how this impacted me and how this is going to impact me going forward from a physical standpoint. I can't necessarily explain why that's so important to me at this moment in time. But, I want you to know things like there are times where I'm sitting in the shower in a ball crying for significant periods of time, going, how could this happen to me? I'm mutilated. I'll suffer. There are times where I'm masturbating or having sex where I'm suffering in that moment. That's not how the sexual experience should be, Mom. That's not how it should be. This had devastated my sexual life. Why would I ever say that if it wasn't the honest to God truth? Why would I come on video and say that? I'm doing this out of desperation. I'm being upfront and honest and sharing this with you and other people because I don't feel like I have any option. I got screwed in life. This is not this minor trivial thing. This destroyed me sexually. And it's just not fair that I would have to do that advocacy on my own. And I'm looking to incorporate this so intimately into my identity and come forward and say, I'm genitally mutilated. That's how I'm going to identify. As in, I need you by my side on that. And same with my father, who I'm going to reach out to as well, who I've already reached out to, but haven't gone into as much depth as I've had with you. And we need to approach this together. And that's the only real way that I see that we can truly build a relationship together, because this has impacted me so severely. It's not something that we can really move forward in the same way our relationship was in the past. This is a totally new relationship that we have now going forward, totally different than what it was before. Yeah, it's mother-son, but there's a twist is all I'm going to say there. And I'm not sure what that's necessarily going to look like, but I'm glad that you're interested in coming on that journey with me.
Tiffany, what would you like to say to that?
I'm going to speak to Carter directly.
Please.
I am just so sorry. I mean, and I've given up saying, most of the time I've given up saying I didn't have the information, and just really kind of tossed away the excuses and just looked at the situation and the hurt that it's caused you. And, it's tough. I think we talked about it the other day. Every time we talk about it, it reignites things in me, and guilt feelings in me. But, this is something you live with. And for us to have a relationship, I kind of have to live with it too. I will say that I want to live in it in healthy ways. I think how we handle it is very healthy. Healthy, how do we define healthy? That we keep open lines of communication, that there's understanding and sort of acceptance where we both are in our points in this journey. But, I think we have a lot, maybe, I think we're not probably unique in the situation that many men who come into this realization of what had happened to them, and they're angry at their parents, there's separation, and maybe they don't ever come back together. Maybe that anger builds and continues to form a wedge. So if part of this is modeling or demonstrating how you work through that process with your parent, and conversations you can have, and what communication over this issue looks like, that's really what I can offer, as well as
Absolutely.
just keep listening.
Carter, is this the acknowledgement you were looking for?
I think it's definitely a part of it. I mean, even from having this conversation, I'm feeling a lot of relief, like getting these things off my chest, being able to communicate them. You're almost acting as a type of, a role a counselor would fill, or someone like that. So I think that mediator is maybe an important part of this process as well. But yeah, I'm definitely feeling relief on this issue that I experience.
Is there something that she could do that would let you know or make you feel that you've been fully acknowledged on this?
I don't necessarily think in this moment right now, but over time, becoming more involved in the activism. I wouldn't even necessarily say activism is what I'm looking to do right away, but this narrative that I'm looking to present on this topic, you know, having my mom involved with that with me would significantly improve, I believe, the narrative and the effectiveness of it and the potency of it. And so when I'm on Facebook, right, and I know none of us should do this, but when I'm commenting and somebody humiliates me, right, I want to be able to tag my mom and she has my back in this situation, right? That's the type of relationship that I want to have with my mom.
You'd
on
like
this
her
topic.
to be the protector that you didn't
Or
get when you were young.
yeah, yeah.
It's very interesting.
How do you feel about that, Tiffany?
Yeah, well, I'm actually grateful he's giving me that opportunity, right? I mean, he's saying, I'm gonna give you like a second. Come on, Mom. I'm here. We get to do it again, and let's get this right. Feels kind of like a second chance.
So Carter, your mom just said that she wants to play that role.
Yeah, and I'm, you know, that's very exciting news for me. You know, I might not be jumping in joy right now, but you know, I always thought that my mom would come to that conclusion. To be honest with you, it's very unfortunate that this lies on the man and the person impacted to be able to communicate that to their parents. That's extremely challenging to do. And I think a lot of men struggle with this. It requires, you know, a lot of emotional intelligence, a lot of confidence, almost a loss of ego to be able to present this to your parents without crippling anxiety. And then,
and yet you have, and she's acknowledged it.
right. And so I'm very, you know, this couldn't have gone better in terms of, you know, the stage that we're at now, I believe. And I think this is very unique as well. It's very novel, the relationship that I have with my mom on this issue. I've seen in a lot of instances, either it's just never discussed or it's, you know, and they kind of have a relationship, or there's no relationship between the parents and the child on this. In some instances, there's some communication happening, but not to the depth and level that I think that my mom and I are communicating, although I'm sure there are examples that people have.
So let me ask, in the future, what is the last moment at which you'll know that she is the protector that you'd like her to be, and someone who is fully acknowledging and taking ownership of the situation in your relationship? What's the moment that you would look at or hear or see and think, yes, this is exactly it?
You know, I think that's a really good question. It's not necessarily that I think I look at my mom as a protector, I would say. I know I just said that previously, but really I'm looking to just have her stand by my side on this issue.
An advocate.
But, you know, I think in a lot of areas, it's very likely that I'm going to have to take the lead. And I want to bring my mom into this process with me. If my mom is interested in taking the lead on this as well, I would love to, you know, stand by her side as well.
So it sounds like you're an adult now. You are capable of leading and taking care of yourself, but you want your parents on your side.
I don't want to be a leader. I'll put that up front right away. Okay. I absolutely do not want to be a leader at all. I would love to be the follower, right? I just unfortunately don't see that leadership. So I want somebody to emerge that is a figure that is identical to what I'm trying to do, because I don't want to do that hard work. I don't want to put myself out there. I do not want to do this. I'm doing it simply because I feel a call to action here, and I don't see any other type of individual, you know, involved in that way.
So on the leadership thing, I can help a bit there. Um, but on the question of the role that you want her to play, what's the
Right.
moment that you'll know she's showing up in the way that you want her to show up?
I definitely think that's a question that I should have the answer to at this point in time. But the truth is that I don't. Um,
It's important to know because that's the moment you'll know that you've gotten what you wanted. And if you don't know what it looks like when you get what you want, it's very hard to get what you want sometimes. So, one of the things I'm noticing is that your mom really cares about you and she wants to show up for you in the way that you want her to show up for you. And she's acknowledging. But at the same time, I don't know if you know exactly what that looks like for you or always aware of the ways that she's showing up. One of the things that I know in my own life is that I experienced a lot of trauma and threats growing up. And so I trained my mind to look for threats because that was very important to my safety. And because that's what my mind was trained to look for, I wasn't aware of all of the love and support that was coming my way because I wasn't looking for it. And I wonder if you were to look and if you look for the amount of love and support that she wants to give you, if you might find that that's there also.
you know, I 100% agree with you. I didn't really frame it that way in my mind previously, but I think that was something very insightful that you shared. The situation, though, is that I'm in an active state of suffering regularly. I think I can move past this, right? I genuinely believe that in the future, this won't impact me like it is right now. But when you're suffering yourself, it's really difficult, as you mentioned, especially when you're suffering significantly, to be able to recognize those signs that somebody is caring for you and that, has your best interests in mind. That's not always the case, right? Sometimes you're very grateful. But in this instance, in this context, it does make it difficult for me to recognize all the generosity and the love that my parents have for me, um, because I am suffering from this, and really also because they had a primary role in this. And so I absolutely hear what you're saying, and I think a good exercise would to recognize try to recognize, all of the generosity and the good things that my parents have done for me. And I think that's a positive way to potentially move forward, or, look to move forward. But I'm not actively ever thinking about that at
So
this
I don't want
moment
to
in time.
bypass and just pretend that everything is good because there obviously is pain and that pain needs our presence.
Hmm.
But I'm wondering if that pain is aware that we're being with it.
If the pain is aware.
The the feelings that you have, the parts of you that are angry, that are upset, that feel this was an atrocity, are you aware that we're there with that too?
I'm aware of it, but the truth is it doesn't have any significance to me, and I wish it did. I mean, I
Mm.
really do. I wish it did, but the honest answer is it means very little to me. So I wish I had a different answer.
So
I
what
wish
does that part need instead? What would be meaningful to it?
so. It's a difficult answer for me to give, but I would like to start seeing progress, on not on the relationship necessarily with my mother, but on the abandonment and criminalization of this practice. So that's something that's very difficult for me to accept, that in the United States and really the rest of the world, um, this is a practice that continues, it persists. Sometimes it's even condoned by the state, federal government. Um, and that I just have to live in this reality in which this very, very harmful practice is continuing. And the reason I do advocacy is because I don't want this practice to continue. And I want my mom involved in this process with me. And the reason that I want my mom involved in advocacy is not because of the fact that it will make me more comfortable or something like that. It'll show that she's by my side. That's one component of it. But it's that I think my mom can play a very potent role in this type of advocacy, and this mother-son combo could garner a lot of attention towards this issue. And so that's what I'd love to see with my mom, is us being successful together as a team on this issue, or at least attempting it, right? But really, I'm looking to have some wins here. I constantly lose on this issue, right? At least that's how it feels when I'm doing advocacy on this, is it's just loss after loss after loss after loss. I'm looking for some wins here.
It reminds me a bit of the biblical saying about love without works is empty. It sounds like you are aware of the love, but you really want some works.
Yes.
I'm aware of it. I think that this conversation really, maybe helped resolve some of the underlying issues, to be honest with you. And then I communicated what I wanted to say. And now I think that there is a strong opportunity to address some call to action here going forward. So I've identified, and probably a lot of other people have identified, that a mother-son advocacy combo here could be quite significant. And so that's the relationship I'm looking to have with my mom. And that's something that I really want to, I want to move forward with this understanding, or at least, beginning to think through how we can begin approaching this. I don't know necessarily what that's going to look like. What are we going to do? Podcasts? What type of material content are we going to look to put together? But because this has impacted me so severely, that's what I'm looking for from my mom, is this kind of commitment to public advocacy as a, in tandem with me, right? As a combination here, and we work together and make this kind of a life pursuit here, to move towards the abandonment of routine genital modification surgeries on neonates and juveniles, and then hopefully the criminalization as well. That's a big thing to ask of somebody. That's honestly quite significant, especially in our society and the current climate of how this is perceived right now. That is a big ask, but it is what I'm asking.
So I want to ask, if the two of you work together on this issue, is there anything that you gain by continuing to hold on to the anger or resentment towards her? Not necessarily towards the world or towards the situation, we're not talking about that, but just in your relationship with her.
I don't think there's anything that I would gain. And if I could just snap my fingers and all that hostility, and even in some moments animosity, could disappear, 100%, I would do it. It would make my life easier. It would make my parents' life easier. And that's what I'd want. That's what I want out of this. Unfortunately, that's not how easy things are for me.
Sure.
And so I don't necessarily know what letting go of that would look like, but if anyone ever has any answers to that, or can guide me through that process, or at least is willing to try, I would be interested in exploring that. But this is something very intimate and very primal, right? The emotion that I have towards this is this extremely, it's not even complex or abstract. I mean, it should be fairly obvious why, I feel the way that I do, but it's this very primal emotion that's difficult to just move on from.
So it would look like potentially doing some of the healing work that both me and my wife are trained in. That's my guess, is what it would look like, because it's a big trauma and those sort of things can be healed, but it requires two things. It requires that you'd want to heal it. In other words, if there's a gain that you get from the feeling, I know sometimes anger can be very motivating, and it can actually create connection too. When we're angry, we're actually often in very strong connection with the person we're angry at. But I think that part of you that feels angry or that wants her to work with you on this issue would understand that connection and that collaboration and that the two of you working together could be even more powerful and effective in the world if it is based entirely in love.
I think it's fair enough and a very powerful statement. A lot of times in the past, I would say, I'm looking to address that after all these other things are taken care of. But I'm beginning to recognize that it is very important to address that in concurrently or even before all these other objectives that I have.
It sounds to me like both of you will need support around the things that you're feeling, but that both of you are aligned and wanting to work together and have a good relationship and take care of the things that are important and take care of each other.
Absolutely.
I'm in agreement.
Is there anything else that you two want to say to each other before we end this conversation? Knowing that, of course, I'm sure the two of you will continue to talk together for the rest of your lives, but for this conversation.
Yeah. Well, Mom, I'm really appreciative that you came on this, call with me today and that you were willing to have this conversation. I think that's something that a lot of parents right now absolutely would not be interested in doing. So some acknowledgement there that how impressive this is definitely warranted, in my opinion. I can, if I was in your position, I can see how difficult this would be. And I think there was a lot of things that had to happen before we get to this point, but I'm extremely grateful. I might not always express it the best, but in this moment, I really do want to express it. I'm very, very grateful that you came on and had this conversation with me. And it really means more to me than probably you will ever know. So I wanted to clarify that to you, that this was a very special and important and precious moment to me, and something that I will remember for the rest of my life. And really, it's the beginning of, I think, a much larger journey. So I want to say that, I'm very appreciative that you came on and that, I love you as my mother, and I'm looking forward to moving forward with you. Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear you say those words. That just means so much. But, son, I look at you and, I see you in a whole another light, and you have every reason to be proud of yourself and what you've done. It's really remarkable. And like you said in the beginning, you're a leader. You've become this person, whether you like it or not, in a leadership role. And I think you have a lot, the way you work through things and your generosity and kindness and patience and intelligence, you have a lot to offer this world. Don't ever forget that.
Thank you for the kind words.
Is there anything else that the two of you would like to add?
Good.
Well, I'd just like to say that I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with the two of you. Thank you for being vulnerable and honest and willing to listen and change and connect to one another. So
thank you.
Yeah. If you'd like to talk in the future in some way, let me know. If you'd like to do any kind of healing or change work with me or my wife, I'm open to that too, either the two of you individually or together. But thanks again for being willing to talk.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks again, Mom. Thanks again, Brendon, for hosting this, and looking forward to talking to you guys soon.
Thank you.
All right. Bye now. Thank you for listening to the Brendon Marotta Show. If you liked this episode, please share it with someone else who would also like it, and then go on whatever platform you listen to the show on and leave a positive review. If you want to support the show directly, go to brendonmarotta.com/show and subscribe there. Paid subscribers get special unreleased bonus material and live events that are only available to them. Once again, that is brendonmarotta.com/show. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you all later.